The Hijaz Railway. It got blown up a lot. Well, there's more to it than that, and it's something I'd like to cover in depth in a longer video at a later date. The Ottomans planned for it to stretch from Istanbul to Mecca, a true pilgrim's railway to the Holy City, although it's very clear transporting thousands to the Hajj was not the only ambition, as the railway makes it a lot easier to move troops. Unfortunately, World War I saw this shorten, and the railway only ran between Damascus and Medina, with a branch line to Haifa. Where our Hijaz story today picks up is in 1946, when Jordan became independent, and running the railway became a separate entity from Syria and the rest of the Hijaz system, and the interesting motive power that transpired. Before 1946, steam power in Jordan consisted of Ottoman-era 19-teens-era machines from European builders like Hartmann, Swiss Locomotive Machine Works, and Borsig. The Syrian Hijaz system would continue to use these, plus some Romanian diesels and rail cars. And in true they don't build them like they used to fashion, there were several instances of one of the Hartmann 282s working the rare freight movement into the 90s. Now, by 1946, a lot of builders were winding down their steam construction and ramping up on diesels, and some of these builders, like Baldwin, would upcharge steam in hopes of driving a customer to diesel. Add to this also Jordan's own religious restrictions when it came to who they'd purchase from, and you come up with a fleet that is varied and interesting. The first engines received/ordered were 464 tank engines from Malaysia. Well, sort of. The War Department had taken 5 of these engines originally bound for the Federated Malay State Railway. After World War II, a dispute over payments, the FMSR didn't want to pay new engine prices for 5 locomotives that had been run hard during the war, for obvious reasons, saw them instead sold to the Jordan Hedjaz. Paid for in 1949 while the engines sat in storage in Suez, the engines had been sent to Egypt during the war, the railway didn't actually receive them until 1951. They were not popular machines either, with limited range in the desert conditions, and advanced rotary cam and poppet valves made them a little bit more maintenance intense, especially for a railway that didn't have a large shop to do heavy overhauls. The Syrian portion maintained the large Kadem workshops, while Jordan used the minor workshops at Amman to its full potential. The first new locomotive purchase were 3 282 Mikados from the builder Robert Stephenson and Hawthorne. Well, they were new in construction date, being outshopped by RS&H in 1951, but in all actuality they were an oil-burning version of the Indian Railway's standard YD class, first delivered in 1927, although the Hijaz 3 are rare in that they were the only ones built by RS&H. The trio were reportedly the most powerful locomotives on the railway, which they certainly show with their massive boilers and no-nonsense freight hog looks. The next new locomotives to arrive on the Hijaz were 9 different locomotives from 2 different builders. The best looking, in my opinion, were the 3 Jung 282s from Germany. Jung is bizarre, as while they did export, most of their machines were either small industrial tank engines or diesels, not big beefy machines like the 3 Mikados provide to the Hijaz. These 3 were part of an equally bizarre set of similar engines exported to other countries, with 2 going to Brazil, Jordan getting these 3, and Angola getting several. All were delivered between 1954 and 1956. These locomotives are definitively German of the time, and look completely modern with exposed pipework and a general ease of maintenance approach. Nothing that doesn't need to be hidden is hidden, and to me personally they look very steampunk. The Hijaz examples were also fitted with attention-demanding and serious-sounding German single-chime whistles, which helped to add to the charisma of these machines. Can you tell I'm a bit biased toward these 3? Now, I did the normal ones first because the next 6 are weird. Also in 1955, Belgian builder Heinz St. Pierre delivered 3 262Ts and 3 282 Mikados to the Hijaz. The Mikados are definitely the design of all time, with a narrow frame, fat boiler, and a tender that looks like it was designed with Legos. I've struggled to find an attractive angle for these machines, and dare I say I still haven't found one. Nope. Not that one. Maybe... no. Okay, that hasn't changed. Now with these Mikados, I've had a theory. Keep in mind this is me only, there's no evidence of this, at least that I've found. These 3 were the only members of this type to exist, but in 1955 several African railways were still in the market for new steam, specifically East African railways, who bought the 30 and 31 class 284s from North British at the time. I've often wondered if Heinz St. Pierre designed these engines to try and cut into the export market, as they had exported Garretts to Mozambique in the 50s and 480s to Colombia in the 20s? I actually forgot about these, but nobody was interested, and the engines went to Jordan. Or when pitched, after exporting these engines to Jordan, nobody else wanted them. Heinz St. Pierre also built 262Ts for the Hijaz around the same time, which unfortunately were also beat with the ugly stick, as now they've got the narrow frames, the fat boilers, and side tanks. There isn't actually a lot on these engines, aside from how after the end of steam, two seem to have swapped numbers. 63 is now 61, and 61 is now 63. The last 4 steam locomotives to arrive in Jordan were 4 Nippon Sharyo built 462s. They were originally built for the Royal Siam Railway in Thailand in 1953 to join the massive fleet of similar engines provided to the railway post-war. However, these 4 were never delivered, and they sat at Nippon Sharyo's factory in Japan until 1959 when they were scooped up by the Hijaz. Their late departure date from Japan actually makes these the last 462s to ever be exported for use in another country. Modifications on these engines to suit the Hijaz were very minimal, the most important thing being regauging from Thailand's 1000mm gauge to the Hijaz's 1050mm, and conversion to oil firing as Thai steam still ran on wood at the time. Despite the conversion, the locomotives still retained the wood bunker siding on the tender, although with an oil bunker plopped squarely in the middle. The most noticeable difference is the lack of smoke deflectors, and after a while, some also lost their Alesco feedwater heaters. The 4 seemed to be pretty popular for working the international train to Daraa in Syria with their high drivers compared to the fleet of 282s, and they definitely looked the part with a train of Ottoman-era coaches trailing behind them. Oddly for a railway with steam built so late, by 1980 the steam fleet was out of regular service, being replaced by 3 GE U-10Bs, of which I think these are the only 3 to be A1A A1A. Definitely an interesting look for a 1000 horsepower GE product. As a positive, most of the locomotives of these oddball types have survived, and at least one of each has run. This is mostly down to the fleet being parked serviceable in Amman, with only a few being scrapped and 3 being sent off for display at the University of Jordan and Al Bayat University, respectively. Of note before we discuss the locomotives, the painted font on the tender is the locomotive's number. The Jordan Hedjaz painted tender numbers in Arabic. Being sat in serviceable condition, most have run for charters on and off since the 1980s in various stages of repair. Number 23 being a good exception. The only RS&H engine to be steamed since the end of steam has had various issues, but over the years has been worked on to a point it's a good performer. All of the Japanese-built Pacifics, minus a scrapped one and one at the University of Jordan, have or do run. Memorable mentions go to number 82 and number 85. In 2000, number 82 is painted in a maroon livery along with several coaches for use in the movie The Mummy Returns, although for reasons unknown, 82 was not used, instead using Jung 51. Meanwhile, number 85 is currently used on the other end of the system at Wadi Rum, where it occasionally pretends to be a Hijaz train being attacked by Arabian raiders in 1916, although it usually is diesel-hauled except under special charter situations. The star of the show, no bias, is definitely 51, which has almost always been serviceable for charters, and has recently been joined by Sister 53, who sat out of service for years, although it is currently pretending to be scrapped Jung 282 number 52. Going forward, it will be interesting to see how steam continues here. No regular service trains run anymore, with the new phosphate railway near Wadi Rum shut, and only an occasional diesel-hauled tourist train running out of Amman. There has been talks of turning the railway into a light rail system that connects a nearby airport, but this also hasn't happened. A positive, though, is the 2010 saw a revival of more of the steam fleet, as 8 of the surviving and on-property locomotives are currently either operational or could be made operational. Middle East steam is always a bit of a touchy subject, as various factors play into if trains can run, or Westerners can visit. But the Jordan Hedjaz seems to want to keep steam going as long as they can, and I personally look forward to visiting someday. I really want to see those young Mikados. Thanks for watching. This was a bit longer than I thought it would be, but I really want to talk about the oddness of the Jordan Hedjaz fleet. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want me to do more of a longer in-depth video on the Hijaz Railway, or steam on the Hijaz in Syria, I'd love to do so, as the Ottoman-era fleet across the border is just as interesting.